everyone, and welcome to our webinar, How to Choose the Right Business School. My name is Nelly, and I'll be the moderator today on behalf of UniMy Prep team. And I'm here today with Dr. Don Martin, who has served 28 years at Chicago Booth, Columbia University, and Northwestern University. And he has worked with hundreds of MBA candidates from all around the world. So I'm very curious to hear his experience and his advice today. Please ask any questions anytime during the webinar. All questions are welcome. You can just type them in the Q&A box or in the chat. And we'll take time to answer at the end of the session. Again, I'm saying all questions are welcome and we love questions. And now I think we're all set. So I'm giving the word to you, Don.
Nelly, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. It is great to be back with you. I believe this is the second webinar that we are doing this year together with UniMy Prep, and I am delighted and honored to have been asked to participate in this series again this year, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have you joining me today for the webinar that's entitled How to Choose the Right Business School, Part 2. Now, we could actually expand this to say how to choose the right graduate/business school, because much of what I will cover today really does apply beyond just business school selection, but we will certainly be kind of talking a little bit more about the business school search. Last time in part 1 of our webinar, we talked about why business schools, why the particular schools that you might choose on your list. And we also went through and talked about various formats for the MBA, full-time versus part-time, on campus versus virtual, and so forth. We covered several different aspects of those programs. Today, obviously, we're going to be covering a little bit of a different couple of pieces of information. Before I get to the agenda, this is just a little information for you to follow what Nelly mentioned when she introduced me. I do have a background in higher education and in more specifically enrollment and student services. And I had the privilege of working for 28 years in 4 major institutions and just had a phenomenal experience. I absolutely loved it. In 2008, then I founded Grad School Road Map and published my book and got things started. And perhaps what might be of interest to you is that I also completed a master's and PhD myself. So I've sat where you're sitting right now twice. And I can only tell you that if your experience as a graduate student is as good as mine, you're in for something amazing. I had a 2-year master's program. My PhD program took me 6 years to complete. They were both incredible. I don't want to do another one. 2 is enough. But that said, if I had it to do over again, I would do both of them again. They were absolutely phenomenal. And I hope that will be your experience as well. So with that in mind, what are we going to cover today in our time together? Well, I'm going to share with you a very brief 2-second description about Grad School Road Map. Then I'm going to repeat something I always talk about. Nelly and her colleagues at UniMy Prep could probably give this part of the presentation as well as I could, because they must listen to it every time. I apologize in advance, Nelly. But anyway, I want to talk about the biggest mistake I believe prospective MBA and graduate students make every year, and it's something you can avoid making easily. So I want to talk about that. But then I want to talk a little bit about why it is important to plan ahead as you are getting ready to submit your applications. And by doing so, it will help you pick the right program and then be on target to submit the best applications. And what I'm going to do to help with this is something that I created when I wrote my book called the Grad School Road Map 12-month application checklist. And today we're going to cover what you should be probably trying to get done, starting with 12 months before you apply up to 7 months before you apply. That will be the bulk of my presentation today. Then I'll have a few tips, or I'll have a few comments about my book. We'll talk about the application coaching we do with Grad School Roadmap, share some upcoming webinars with Unimi Prep, and then we're going to take questions. And as Nellie said, we love questions. All questions. There's no bad question. If you want to ask, the same person wants to ask several questions, you should feel free to do that. We would welcome anytime the questions you would want to ask us. So please put them in the chat box or the question box on your screen whenever you have them, and we will try to cover every question we can when we can conclude our comments for today. So now, what is Grad School Road Map? Well, this is a boutique admissions resource certainly for prospective students such as yourselves, but we also work with applicants, we work with alumni, we work with enrollment management staff to help others navigate the graduate school research and application process. We are exclusively former deans, graduate admissions directors and deans, which I think helps make us a bit unique in this particular area, in this particular space. We were founded, as I said, in 2008. And as you can see here, we have had some wonderful opportunities to present webinars, workshops, in-person presentations all over the world. And we also have coached now up over 600 applicants over the past 14 years. And we have a 97% acceptance rate. 97% of them have been admitted to one or more of their top graduate or business school choices. So it's been an incredible opportunity, a great journey, and I'm very excited to be part of the Grad School Road Map team and to have been able to found the company. Okay, with that said, if you've joined me last time at part 1 of this webinar series, then you already know what I'm going to say. But the biggest mistake prospective MBA and grad students typically make every year is not doing adequate research before they apply. In my 40-some years of working with prospective graduate and MBA students, this happens almost every year. What seems to take place is that a great deal of emphasis is placed on 2 elements of their search. First, word of mouth. Maybe they know a student that went to a particular program, and that's okay, that's helpful. But they just kind of accept that student's word above everything else. And secondly, they base all their decisions on a ranking. In my opinion, while those 2 are useful, if that's the only reason, the only way you decide where you're going to apply, you are shortchanging yourself dramatically. So in order to help you avoid making this mistake, what do I suggest? Obviously, as you might expect, first of all, you need to start out with quite a few options that you're considering for your MBA program or your graduate school program. I suggest at least 15 or 20. I don't mean that you're going to apply to all of these by any stretch, but you will be at least taking a look at them. You'll be doing some research. This is your education, not someone else's. And your decision about where you're going to enroll should not be overly influenced by somebody who did a ranking. By the way, I don't have time to get into this issue of rankings, but I'll just say right now, they are very, very unreliable. They are misleading for the most part, and they have absolutely no validity when it comes to your ultimate success in life. Many people think if they go to a top 10 MBA program, top 10 grad program, that's going to somehow magically mean that they will be successful the rest of their life. There's no evidence of that, absolutely none. And I think you make a big mistake. So at any rate, you want to start out with 15 or 20 options, 25. I had one coaching client who actually started out with 40 options before they narrowed it down to the 10 programs to which they applied. But they started out with 40. That's wonderful. Now, what do you do when you get all these options? In my opinion, you create a spreadsheet and you list these options on one column, and then you fill in the spreadsheet with areas you would like to compare between these options. Here is a small list. By the way, this is not an exhaustive list. by any means. These are just some points that students have told me are important to them when they're thinking about the schools they're considering. So look at this list. There's quite a few things I would think you would want to be comparing. And if you'll take a look at the second column toward the bottom, the third item from the bottom in column number 2, it says interaction with current students and faculty. One of the things I would hope you would want to do is ask some current or former recently graduated students at least 2 questions. What did you like most and least about this program? And secondly, if you had it to do over again, knowing what you now know about this particular institution, would you choose to enroll there? If you ask me that question, Dr. Don, would you enroll in both of the programs you went to for your master's and PhD if you had it to do over again? Overwhelmingly, my answer would be yes. But for many, the answer is not yes, it is no. They're very disappointed with what they got. I would think you'd want to know that. That's just one of, look at all of these. So make sure that you do your research. I can't tell you how often when students do this, their rank order of the schools they're thinking about completely changes. And a program, excuse me, that they thought was going to be number 1 on their list in the beginning ends up, they don't even apply, or it moves way down on the list. And a program they weren't thinking they might be as interested in moves up. So please take the time to create the spreadsheet and do some comparison shopping. Number 3, as I said, do some genuine, once you have all this information, you filled in all the boxes, do your homework, do your due diligence, take your time to do this. I know you will end up with a much better list of 5, 7, 9, 10 programs to which you will actually apply. So here again, please, you do not need to make this mistake. You've got so many resources available to you between various organizations that provide information about graduate business programs or graduate programs, as well as the websites for each of these institutions themselves, plus the research you would do. You've got a lot of information, and you can, if you take the time, you will end up, I promise you, with a much better selection of programs to which you will apply. Okay, let's move along to, one last tip here. Many times applicants start out their application process already knowing what they think about some of the programs they're applying to without having done any research. In my opinion, that's backwards. Your perception about the institutions and business schools you're thinking about applying to would happen at the end of your research, after you've done it all. It's not where you start out. You don't automatically decide, oh, I'll just pick these 5 schools. No, you do your research, then you have your perception about these options. And then you decide, okay, now this is where I'm going to apply. So again, do your research, okay? All right, let's now move to the importance of planning ahead. Why is this something that I talk about? I mention it in my book. It is so important. A couple of reasons why I suggest you plan ahead. Obviously, as you might expect, the first is by doing so, you give yourself adequate time to do research. Now, let's think about this just a moment. This is March the 15th. For MBA programs, typically first round deadlines may fall on or around September 1st, September 15th, October 1st. This is March. You are 6 months out from applying to an MBA program. You've got, if you start doing your research now, you've got adequate time to really decide where you want to attend. This is not August, this is March. So by doing it now, you've got some adequate time for your research. Number 2, you can better organize your application priorities. Do you think you need to spend some time really preparing if you have to take the GMAT or the GRE how much time do you need to do that? I find that oftentimes applicants are trying to take their standardized test at the same time they're trying to prepare their applications. That's a little too much. That's an awful lot to be trying to negotiate. Once again, this is March. One strategy that many of my applicants employ is taking their standardized test by June. If they're going to apply in September, taking the first test in June and see how they do. If they need to take it over, they still have some time to do that while they're beginning to prepare applications, as opposed to waiting till August to take it for the first time. And then if it doesn't go well, then they're scrambling. So you want to make sure you've got your priorities in order of how you're going to apply. What are you going to do and when are you going to do it to make sure you've got the best application to submit? That's why you need to plan ahead. Next reason, obviously, as I just said, you have some time to focus on and if some of you have to take a TOEFL in addition to the GMAT and GRE, obviously, this gives you time to spread things out. Again, the importance of starting early. You get a chance to focus on your essays and recommendation letters. Typically, with the students I work with, they get their tests out of the way, as I said. They do that first. Then they begin thinking about their recommenders, who they're going to ask to write letters of recommendation for them. And then they set up their application accounts, and then they start working on them, getting ready their essays. It's a bit of an organized pattern of how they plan. So this is very, very, very important and very helpful to plan ahead. Now, next, obviously, if you're planning ahead and you're giving yourself enough time, you have less stress and you don't feel that tremendous pressure that comes from rushing. I can't tell you, in my 28 years as an admissions dean, excuse me, if you'll give me one moment, I promise this is water and I'm going to have a drink. Thank you. There we go. During my 28 years as an admissions dean, 11 of those years were spent at Chicago Booth, by the way. But during that time, I evaluated over 125,000 applications in that 28-year period of time. I could write a book on the bad applications I received, largely because students did not take the time to do the preparation and planning and really focusing on preparing a good application. This happened, I can't tell you, and it hurt them. Sometimes they were denied because of it. This is truly, you do not want to be rushing, because you're going to do the last reason here, far fewer mistakes. One of the biggest mistakes that applicants make when they're rushing is they'll send an essay to another, for one school to another school. They mix them up. I used to read essays from applicants for Chicago Booth sometimes, and it would say, and that is why the UCLA Anderson School of Business or the Stanford School of Business or MIT or whatever, Columbia, is my number one choice. That they obviously sent me the essay they'd written for those other schools. Well, they were denied. If that was how they felt, I thought, okay, well then I wish you well, but clearly you're not really interested in Chicago Booth. So you will make far, far, far fewer mistakes if you take the time to really plan ahead. Now, we're about 20 minutes into our presentation. I'm probably going to be talking for another 20 minutes or so. And then, as I said at the top of our broadcast here, we're going to take questions. I think we're getting a few. I hope you're writing them down. There are no bad questions. There are no dumb questions. Whatever you want to know, please put it in the chat box so that Nellie can ask these questions when we get to the conclusion of our comments, okay? All right, so we've talked about the biggest mistake you can make as a prospective business or graduate school student, not doing adequate research before you apply. We've discussed that. We've also talked about the importance of planning ahead. What are we going to talk about next? Well, let's see. We want to now talk about what I mentioned, the 12-month application checklist. And now, let me just say, I just mentioned that this is March 15th. If you're applying for first round MBA deadlines, you're already 6 months away, and I'm giving you a 12-month checklist. Please know that if you have to condense some of these into a shorter period of time, that's okay. In other words, what I'm telling you to do 12 months out, if you start doing that now, that's okay. You haven't missed the boat. Now, if you were 1 month away from applying and I gave you a 12-month checklist, then you might not be able to do all of that. But you're fine to spread this out or condense it a little bit, what I'm about to share. But here's a couple of things that I would like to share with you. There's a much longer list of suggested things to be doing 12 months out, 11 months, 10 months, and so forth in the first chapter of my book. But this is a bit of a synopsis of those. So let's start with 12 months out your application checklist. 10 to 12 months before you're applying, of course. What would you expect me to suggest to you? That's when you start doing thorough research. It's not too late to do that. You can still do that right now. Do your homework, create that spreadsheet, and get things set up. What is most important to you? Get your list of 20, 15, 20, 25 options and start comparing. Start doing some comparison shopping. That's the most important thing at this. By the way, you don't have to do this, but if you do decide to create a spreadsheet, my strong recommendation is that you do your options in alphabetical order. Don't have any ranking yet. Just alphabetize them from A to Z. Then fill in all the information you want to know about all those options. And then, as I said, your perception about the programs comes at the end of your research, not when you start out. So one way to help you with that is to make the options alphabetical. Do not list them in any rank order when you're first starting out to do your research. Okay? All right. Now, 7 to 9 months out, I want to spend a little more time on some of these that I'm going to suggest today. First of all, this is the time, if you haven't done so already, to make sure that you are somehow getting in touch with the institutions, business schools, grad schools, by doing some campus visits and participating in some recruiting events. I believe all business schools and countless numbers of graduate schools offer admissions and campus visit programs all through the year. There are virtual events on lots of different things. They also, almost all of the websites have interactive virtual campus tours. I can't tell you how many students I work with who absolutely had never taken a tour of the campus that they were interested in. They had no idea what it looked like. I don't understand that. They didn't. If there's an online or virtual event, or you can go in person, you owe it to yourself. I would suggest you attend a couple events if you can. This is going to have an impact on your perception of these programs. Without a doubt, it will impact them. So please start doing this now. There probably will be some admissions events over the summer, in the spring, over the summer, in the fall. There's certainly opportunities for you to go on, at least at a minimum, and have a virtual campus tour, which could raise some questions that you would like to ask the institutions about their programs or their campus. And that's another way to do great research. When you send a message to the admissions office, put that on your spreadsheet. How did the admissions office treat me? How did they respond to me? That's huge. That makes a huge difference. So again, make sure that you participate in some recruiting events, and at a minimum, take a virtual tour of the campus so you have an idea of what you would be, where you would be if you chose to attend that institution down the road. Okay, here again, prepare for your standardized test. What did we say planning ahead allows you to do? If I were a student applying this fall to enroll in the fall of 2023, I would be very much well into planning to take whatever standardized tests I have to take to have them out of the way by May or June. That would be my goal. I'm not saying that will be yours, but I certainly encourage you, prepare ahead of time. If some folks don't believe they need to prepare, others do. If you are one of those who does believe you need to prepare ahead of time, then you've got some time now. This is the time that I would, excuse me, strongly recommend that you begin your preparing for your standardized tests that you will be taking. By the way, there are several different ways to do this. For instance, the GMAT is managed by an organization called the Graduate Management Admission Council, or GMAC. You can log on to the website of GMAC and find out about what materials they offer to help you prepare for the GMAT. GRE, the same. The organization that manages the GRE is called the Educational Testing Service, or ETS. You can log on to the Educational Testing Service website and find out about some preparation that you can undertake for the GRE. So once again, that's one. Others, if you go to a bookstore and you go to the section of the bookstore where if there's an academic section or a college and graduate school section, obviously you're going to find, I don't know how many options will be there, materials, resources. You could do an online search, resources available to help me prepare for the GMAT, the GRE. Lastly, there are organizations that do tutoring. Many, they'll do one-on-one. Now, this is typically more expensive, or they might have a class, a virtual class that you can participate in. So whether it's the graduate management, I'll do this again because in case you're wanting to write this down, if you want to prepare for the GMAT through the Graduate Management Admission Council, you would log on to their website, the Graduate Management Admission Council website, and find out what they have. If it's the GRE, it's the Educational Testing Service, or ETS. You log on to the website, find out what they have. Or you can go to a bookstore, purchase materials that way. You can do an online search, maybe order something through Amazon or tutoring. So all of this to say, lots of options for you to prepare for your standardized tests. The other tip, this is the time that I believe you should be reaching out to current students and recent graduates to start filling in your spreadsheet a little bit more. I believe we've had some individuals just join us in the past few minutes. So in case you missed this earlier, this is one of the most critical aspects of research I would think you'd want to undertake. And I would urge you to ask 2 questions, at least, of current students or recent graduates when you meet with them or speak with them or have a Zoom call or Skype call or WhatsApp or whatever it may be. The first question always would be, what do or did you like most and least about the program? And they should be able to tell you both. They should be, no program is perfect. If they don't have anything to say that they wish was better at the school they attended, something's, I think, a little wrong. I loved my time in my master's and doctoral program, but there were some things I think could have been done better. So you want to make sure they answer both of those questions. And the second question is, if you had it to do over again, knowing what you now know about this institution, would you apply? Or would you enroll? Would you still go? Those are very, very telling questions. So please, here's what you want to be doing between, now, if you're 6 months away, you still have time to do these things. But make sure that this is what you're doing sooner than later as you continue to move towards submitting your applications. Okay, so in summary, what we've talked about today is the biggest mistake prospective students make. I hope you remember this word, not doing adequate what? I know I can't hear you, but I hope you're saying not doing adequate research before you apply. That's the biggest mistake. Planning ahead. Many, many, many advantages to doing this. The most important one, I would think, for you fewer mistakes. You won't be rushing. You won't be under such pressure, and you will submit a better application. There's no doubt about that. And then we talked about the application checklist. What are some things you should be doing 12 to 10 months out? Basically, that's the research component, doing your due diligence, comparison shopping, creating your spreadsheet, and then 7 to 9 months out, we want to do some campus visits, at least a virtual tour. If that's all you can do, that's fine for now. You want to participate, get some recruiting events on your calendar for these schools. Make sure you're preparing for your standardized tests. Lots of options to help you do that. And then reach out to current students and recent grads to ask those 2 very important questions. Okay, now let me tell you a little bit about my book in our remaining time before we move to questions. I see we have questions coming in, please. And by the way, if you have a question about something I didn't even talk about today, but it's related to your MBA or graduate school experience, research, application process, please ask. We can answer any questions today that you would like to ask. This book of mine, the first edition came out in 2008, the second in 2018, 106 pages. It's a very short book, 4 chapters. The first chapter, all about how to do good research for your application process. Second chapter, the entire application process, everything you ever wanted to know about creating a good application. Third chapter, how to succeed once you're in grad school. I've never seen anybody talk about this in a book or a resource for grad school students. So there's a whole chapter on that. The last chapter, there are 4 types of students I worked with over the years: prospective students, applicants, admitted students, and current students. And I have a top 10 questions list for each of those 4 groups in chapter 4 with my response to the questions. So if you're interested, you can go to the Grad School Road Map website. If you get onto the order page and you use the special promo code GSRM, you will get a 50% discount on the price of the book. So something for you to keep in mind and check out as you continue to prepare for your application process. We also, as I mentioned, we do graduate school application coaching. We've worked with over 600 applicants. As I said, 97% of them have been admitted. We're close to $15 million in funding now for these individuals. This has been a very, very wonderful collaboration with our coaching students. I'd say of that 600, probably half of them, about 300, were MBA clients that I've worked with. So it's been a very successful. If you would be interested, when you go onto the Grad School Road Map website, you will find a little contact box that you can fill out to request a free 30-minute consultation, which I would be delighted to engage in with you if that would be of interest. So don't hesitate to please reach out to me if I can be of any help in that regard. Okay, right before we get to the Q&A session with Nellie, I see some questions are coming in. I think we've got time to answer some more. So whatever you want to know, this is free, no charge. So feel free to ask those questions. I love questions, whatever they are. Our upcoming webinars with Unimi Prep, April 12th, will be our 3rd and final series, part of the series, Choosing the Right Business School. This will be the application checklist 6 months to 1 month out before you apply. So very, very helpful information there. Then on June 21st, I very rarely heard anyone spend time talking about the importance, how important letters of recommendation are in the application process. They can absolutely make or break an application. And I'm going to give you a little tip here. I'm going to give you some inside information from the side of the table where an admissions dean is sitting. This may come as a surprise to you, but of the probably 80,000 applications I evaluated while I was at Chicago Booth, 80,000, I would say 90, not 9, 90% of the letters of recommendation I read were useless. They did not help me at all. They were meaningless. And in many cases, they hurt an applicant much more than they help them. So I hope you will join me, of course, on April 12th, but I want to stress already, this is going to be a I've never seen webinars that focus specifically on letters of recommendation. And Nellie and I, as we were talking about some important topics that would be relevant and helpful, I don't remember which one of us suggested this, but I'm so glad it's on the list because I think this is going to be very helpful. Similarly, on July 12th, we're going to talk about planning your MBA strategy. By July 12th, you're 2 months out from first round MBA application deadlines. You could be 5 months out or 6 from second round, but we're going to talk about just putting things together to make sure, again, that you're doing all you can to have a good strategy and present a good application at the best time that you should be presenting it. So I hope you'll write these down, these dates, April 12th, April 21st, July 12th, and then we're going to even have, excuse me, a few more webinars coming up later in the year. We'll be telling you about those, and Unimi Prep obviously will be advertising them. So I really hope you'll take time to join me. I absolutely love doing this and speaking with you. So with that, we're closing in on our 40 minutes. I would like to close by giving you some contact information for me. Obviously, you can go to the Grad School Road Map website, as I said, to request a free consultation to order the book, but you can also reach out to me directly. My email address is here, dmartin@gradschoolroadmap.com. I would be delighted to communicate with you. Sometimes individuals who participate in my webinars may have some questions that they are not as comfortable asking in this particular setting. They would rather ask me those questions one-on-one. So, excuse me, I think I need another swig of water. Hold on. There we go. So if that's your situation and you have a question or something you'd like to ask me, just the two of us, please feel free to reach out on my email address, and I will of course get back in touch with you. This has been such a pleasure. I hope nobody's going to leave us yet, because you know what? In my experience, sometimes the Q&A can be just as informative, if not more so, than the webinar itself. We get excellent questions. I think I think we've got some. So anyway, let's see how many we have. I'm going to stop talking now, but before I do, thank you all for spending this time with us today. I couldn't wish you more success as you embark on this incredible opportunity you have for your graduate school education. And as I said at the beginning, I hope your graduate experience will be as wonderful and meaningful and fulfilling as mine has been, and that this information today might help you in that regard. Nellie, thanks to you and the Unimi Prep team for giving me this continued opportunity to work with you and to speak with your students. I so appreciate it. And I will now stop talking and see if we have any questions that I might be able to answer.
Thank you very much, Don. Indeed, we have a few questions, so I'm going to jump in with the first one.
Good, excellent.
I'm only planning to apply to 3 programs. Do you think this is enough? I think maybe 3 MBA programs, I guess.
This person is going to apply to 3. Well, in order to best, I'm very glad you asked that question, by the way. That is an excellent question. In order to fully answer it, I probably would want to chat with you a little bit, one-on-one, because I think what I'd want to know is what led you to choose only 3 programs. Perhaps it has to do with that you are choosing a certain location, or maybe due to your living situation, maybe you want to stay in the area where you now live and pursue your education there. There could be some very good reasons for that. And if so, then there's no pressure from me ever on someone that you must apply to a much larger number of programs. Now, the bottom line is that you feel comfortable with the number that you've ultimately chosen. As you might expect, depending on the programs that you've chosen as the 3 that you're going to apply to, if they are more competitive, meaning if they get a lot more applications, and the chances of getting in are fewer, then 3 might be a little bit too few. But on the other hand, if you feel like, you know what, I'm going to try these 3 schools. If I don't get in this year, I'll try again. I don't have to start in the fall of 2023. Then, so bottom line, you get to make the final choice, and only you know all of the particular situations that are behind the choice you're making. This is a very personal, individual decision. So yes, don't hear me saying, oh my gosh, if you only apply to 3 schools, that's terrible. No, I don't feel that way. Depending on your circumstances, if you're thinking about that, makes sense. If it's reasonable, if it's realistic, and you've thought it all through and you want to stick with 3, then I say go for that and see what happens. That's a very, I'm so glad you asked. That's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. It was a very specific question, and I think you really answered well.
Thank you. And Nelly, please join in anytime you want to add anything. I love your feedback.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have another question because you mentioned the recruitment events. I think this is a very relevant question.
Yes.
This person is saying, I want to go on a recruitment event and meet school representatives, but I'm afraid I may ask something stupid. Can you give some advice?
Way to go. Whoever asked that, again, that was an excellent question. And of course, I understand your concern because you don't want to come across anything less than professional, courteous, respectful. You want to make a good presentation, as we all know, and this may be part of your question. First impressions are very important. When we meet someone, this is something that's part of the human condition. We all formulate first impressions of someone. We just do. When we meet them, we just either it's negative or positive. So it makes sense that you would be asking, oh my gosh, how can I not make myself look foolish or ask a question that would be, I think to use your words, a stupid question. Okay, here's a couple of things. I will first share with you 2 questions I would suggest you never, ever ask an admissions representative under any circumstances whatsoever. Never, never ask these 2 questions. The first one. Now, you may laugh when you hear this and think, are you serious, Dr. Don? You mean people ask this? Yes, I'm serious because I'm telling you that they do. The first one is, what are your application deadlines? I was stunned when students would come up to my table and would ask me that. And I was thinking, what in the world is your problem? They're posted everywhere. They're all over the website. They probably sent you an email message about them if you've been reaching out or if you've attended an event. So that's information you can find for yourself. Okay. Second is similar. Okay. Now, I'll explain this in a moment. The second question you never want to ask an admissions dean or representative is, do you offer financial aid? Of course they offer financial aid. Now, the one time you can ask something more about financial aid is if you've gone onto the website, you've gone to the financial aid section and you've checked it out. You've taken some notes on some things that you read. And if you're an international student, you particularly focused on the information they were providing for international students, and you have some questions about what you read. That's excellent. If you ever walk up to an admissions representative and you say, I was reading your website and here you said this about this scholarship, or you mentioned this about an international student, and you're actually you're kind of showing them that you printed a copy of that page and brought it with you. That is very impressive. That lets this representative know, okay, this person is not asking me questions they can answer for themselves. They've done some homework. They've done some, what's the word we talked about? The biggest mistake? Research. They've done some research. And now they want to ask me a question about the research they've done on my program. They'll probably write your name down in a positive way if you do that. So beyond those two questions you never want to ask, what are your deadlines? Do you offer financial aid? The questions you do want to ask should reflect the research that you've already done and your desire to learn more about whatever that was that you were reading. You'd like to learn more about it. And by the way, if this person who asked this question would like to contact me again privately, and if you want to give me a list of some questions that you were thinking about asking to just wonder what I think, feel free to do that. I'll gladly provide. There's no charge. That's not a consultation. Just send it to me and I'll take a look at it and give you some ideas. But bottom line, the best advice I give, do not ask questions that you can answer for yourself with the information that's already been provided by the institution. That's what you don't want to do. I hope that's helpful. Excellent. Another excellent question. Way to go.
Thank you very much for the great advice, Don.
Sure.
We have one last question, and
All right.
I'm smiling here because I've seen this question so many times, because we cannot talk about MBA without talking about GMAT.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So the question is, if I have a low GMAT score, what can I do to compensate this in my application?
Wonderful question. Wonderful question. Now, by the way, if somebody else is thinking of a question, we still have some time. I'm not trying to push you. I'm not, if we're answering all your questions, that's wonderful. But if you have another one, I think we've got a little time. But that said, I want to share with you, when I worked at Chicago Booth, and I was the final decision maker at that time on all the applications. We had a committee. There were two members of the committee who reviewed an application before it came to me. And then I reviewed it and made a final decision. And I will tell you right now, test scores to me are not that helpful. I don't care whether it's a 780 on the GMAT or a 400. In my experience, MBA students I admitted with both of those scores did beautifully in our program. And yes, you heard me correctly. I did admit some students with a 400 GMAT when I worked at Chicago Booth. Now, clearly, in the case of the lower scores, to use the word of the person who asked this question, there was some compensating. They had done some compensating. So here's my advice. First of all, if you take the GMAT the first time and it doesn't go well, take it a second time for sure. Oftentimes, even when students have been preparing on their own, or they've attended a class, or they've had a tutor or whatever, sometimes that test anxiety, the very first time you're taking it for the real score, is a bit disconcerting for millions of students. And they may have been in practice GMATs before they took the real thing. They might have gotten a 700 or a 710 in their practice test. Then they take the first one and they get a 650 or lower, and they're just devastated. I know that doesn't feel good, but don't be discouraged. That happens quite a bit. Take it again. Then, now, will your anxiety be completely gone? Perhaps not, but at least you'll have been through the experience once. This won't be the first time you're doing this. And let's say that you take the test the second time and the score goes up considerably. Then that should give you a level of comfort, knowing that when the application reaches the evaluators, only your highest score will be evaluated. They won't look at the lower score. They'll look, the highest score will be taken. All right. Let's say you take the test the second time and it goes up a little bit, but it doesn't do a whole lot, or it goes down a little bit. Then you have a choice. Do you take it a third? I never recommend taking any standardized test more than 3 times. I think that then you start looking desperate. You start looking like you're just taking some applicants submitted 12 GMAT scores in their application. That was to me not helpful. But if you decide you want to take it one more time, that's fine. If if your scores don't go as high as they ever were when you were taking practice tests, or they're just not within they're not high enough to be within the average, a real high average for that program, then you definitely want to address that in an optional essay or some providing. Most MBA programs ask you if there's any additional information you would like to provide to the admissions committee that you haven't had a chance to cover elsewhere in the application. You definitely want to address your lower GMAT score. You don't want to spend pages on it, just a paragraph, something to the effect that I really prepared for this test. I took it twice. I took it 3 times in an effort to do the very best I can. I'm not sure that this is the strongest part of my application, but I would like to point out some other aspects that I believe, I hope the committee will consider. And that's where you compensate with a GPA, with the work experience you've had, with some of the research you might have done, with whatever else in that application. Obviously, your credentials don't just consist of a test score. That's only one of many things you're going to be submitting. And I would think most of those things will be very good, or you would feel like you weren't going to apply at all. So the fact that you're applying means that you've decided you have a pretty good chance of having some very good credentials to be evaluated. And that's what you ask the committee to focus on. And I can promise you, if the average GMAT score for a particular business school for their incoming class is a 710, let's say, or 720, that's the average. I don't know if they always provide their range of scores. We always did at Booth when I was there. We provided the average, then we provided the range. Every of the 11 years that I worked at Chicago Booth, every single year, the range of GMAT scores was anywhere from 450 to 500, most likely, up to 800. A huge range. One year, now this only happened once, but I admitted someone who had a 390 GMAT. Can you believe that? You're hearing correctly. 390 GMAT. Now that happened once, but they talk about compensating. That person obviously had a phenomenal application. And interestingly enough, the 2 members of the admissions committee who read it before it came to me, both unanimously said, Dean Martin, we need this guy. We've got to take him. You've got to admit him. It was clear. There was no, it was just like that GMAT score was a moot point. So again, don't let that discourage you. Take it a second or maybe third time. And if it still doesn't go as you hoped, then you can address it and talk about it and focus on the other aspects of your application that you believe do make you a competitive application. And I'm sure they do. These 3 questions are, they were just excellent, Nellie. And I think I took a little more time to answer them than I should have, but they were all so good.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much, John. Especially with this last answer, I think you encourage a lot of people.
Well, it's the truth. GMAT is not everything. It really isn't. Now, you made me just think of something. GMAT scores do get used after people get in, sometimes to determine scholarships, which I wish did not happen, but it does. So if you have a lower GMAT score, you could be admitted. It could affect some of your scholarship opportunities, but it should not have an undue effect on the admissions decision.
Thank you very much. We don't have any more questions, but I see someone in the chat saying thank you for the nice information. So also on behalf of all the attendees and on behalf of our team, thank you, Don.
You're so welcome. My pleasure.
For everyone who attended, thank you very much, and we wish you best of luck.